Have you ever, found yourself standing in your kitchen, maybe staring blankly into the fridge?
Mm-hmm.
Or sitting dead still in completely gridlocked traffic,
Wow.
right? And suddenly you are just crushed by the sheer suffocating weight of, well, what could have been.
Oh, yeah. The classic existential traffic jam.
Right. You know the sensation, yes, that visceral flash of an alternate life where, you took a different job or stayed in that relationship or maybe moved to that other city.
Yeah.
The air gets thin for a second. We all have those moments of confronting our unlived lives. But what if that feeling wasn't just a fleeting, wistful daydream?
Right.
What if your alternate life wasn't a choice you failed to make, but a life that was legally, structurally, and permanently taken from you?
That changes the entire premise.
Exactly. And that is exactly our mission for today. We are doing a deep dive into an incredible essay from the Thoughtless Delineation publication. It's from their 16th issue titled The Adoptee Multiverse: What Everything, Everywhere, All at Once Reveals About Identity After Separation.
And it's a phenomenal piece of writing.
It really is. It takes the cinematic chaos of the film Everything, Everywhere, All at Once and uses it as a forensic surgical map.
Yeah, not just a fun pop culture reference.
No, not at all. It uses it to dissect exactly how human identity fractures and rebuilds after family separation. And it completely dismantles everything we think we know about the lived adoptee experience.
It forces a necessary structural read of an experience that, honestly, we usually just drown in sentimentality.
Yes, so much sentimentality.
Right. What the author does here is shift the paradigm completely. So, we're going to approach this deeply complex topic through what the essay calls a post-tragic lens.
Let's define that for the listener, because it's an important term.
Yeah, so post-tragic means we have to be entirely clear-eyed about the structural harm and systemic erasure adoptees face.
Right.
We aren't going to soften the reality of family separation with, false chirpy positivity.
Toxic positivity today.
Exactly. But nor are we going to spiral into helpless despair. It's a clear, honest look. We are also going to use honest adoption language. This is critical for the framework of our deep dive.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, we are treating the lived experience of the adoptee not as some psychological pathology that needs to be cured, right? But as a profound, specialized expertise in how the human mind handles existential dislocation.
So if you're listening to this and thinking, I'm not an adoptee, I don't have a connection to the adoption constellation, so this doesn't apply to me, stick with me. Do not tune out.
Please don't.
Because the mechanics of how an identity shatters under the weight of an unlived life
Mm.
and the monumental, agonizing labor it takes to stitch a core self back together is going to fundamentally change how you view your own resilience.
Oh, completely. It's universally applicable.
It will change how you understand grief and what it actually takes to be present in your own messy reality. So we have to start with the inciting incident, right?
The rupture.
The exact moment. The timeline shatters. Exactly. In the sci-fi trope of the multiverse, which we see so brilliantly executed in Everything Everywhere, the protagonist's timeline splinters because of a profound personal choice.
Right. Evelyn makes a choice.
Yes. Evelyn chooses to leave her home, her father, her country, and follow a man to a new world. And that singular exertion of agency shatters her reality, spawning a million alternate Evelyns who took different paths.
And that is the crucial distinction the essay makes right up front.
Mm-hmm.
In the film, the rupture is born of personal agency. But when we map this onto the adoptee experience, we have to look at the cold, hard mechanics of the system.
Right. It's entirely different.
For the adopted person, the rupture point is never a choice. It is entirely devoid of agency. It is a purely administratively imposed event.
Administratively imposed. That phrase just hits heavy.
It does. We have to look at the exact moment a legal system intervenes to overwrite a human being's reality.
I am so hung up on the mechanics of this because, we treat this as normal bureaucracy, right?
Yeah, just paperwork.
Just paperwork. Yeah. But it is actually wildly dystopian when you think about it.
Yeah.
We are talking about a court stepping in, taking an original birth record, which is the literal biological documentation of a human entering the world and sealing it away in a vault.
In many cases, permanently.
Permanently. And then the state issues an amended birth certificate. Okay, let's unpack this. It's like having your personal history treated as a rough draft that the government just threw in the trash.
That is a perfect analogy.
It takes a biological fact, crumples it up, and prints a final copy with new parents, a new name, sometimes even a new location of birth.
Mm-hmm.
It is legally sanctioned erasure.
It's profound.
The state is essentially mandating your previous timeline no longer exists. This piece of paper is your only reality now. But I have to push you on this, structurally speaking. If an entire timeline, the language, the unbroken ancestral thread, the name is legally erased, where does that energy go?
Right, because energy doesn't just disappear.
Exactly. How does an erased life continue to manifest?
Well, you have to ask yourself what happens to the human psyche when its foundational document is a state-mandated fiction.
Wow. State-mandated fiction.
The essay argues profoundly that the original timeline doesn't simply vanish just because a judge signed a piece of paper and sealed a file. You cannot legislate a biological and ancestral lineage out of existence.
You can't just mandate it away.
No, you can't. Instead, that erased life becomes a structural wound. The essay calls it a psychological phantom limb.
A phantom limb, like the neurological phenomenon where someone loses an arm, but their brain still feels the fingers twitching.
Exactly.
They still feel the itch on the skin that isn't even there.
It is exactly the same mechanism, but applied to identity and timeline. The brain still possesses the neurological, epigenetic, and psychological map of the missing lineage.
That is wild to think about.
The space for that original life remains active in the architecture of the adoptee's consciousness. It functions as a ghostly parallel universe.
So it's always there.
Always. It's a constant, low-frequency hum vibrating beneath the surface of their constructed reality. So the adoptee is left holding two origin stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
The biological one that was violently severed, and the adoptive one that was legally constructed. And the profound, quiet tragedy here is that neither of these origin stories seamlessly belongs to them in the way an unbroken history belongs to a non-adopted person.
They're suspended between them.
Yeah, they're constantly navigating the friction between a life they have but didn't originate from and an origin they have but are legally barred from living.
I look at it like architectural ghost floors in a skyscraper.
Oh, that's a good way to picture it.
Like you press the elevator button for the 13th floor and it just skips to the 14th because the building was designed to pretend the 13th floor doesn't exist.
Right, the button isn't even there.
Exactly. But the physical space is still there. The structural weight is still there in the building. So if you're carrying that phantom limb, this invisible alternate universe strapped to your back, how does that actually manifest on like a random Tuesday?
That's the crucial question.
If we push past the abstract theory here, what is the sensory day-to-day reality of carrying a ghost timeline?
This is where the essay introduces the concept of involuntary verse jumping.
Okay, let's get into this.
In the cinematic multiverse, verse jumping is the mechanic characters use to access the skills or memories of their alternate selves.
Yeah, Evelyn needs to do kung fu, so she taps into the universe where she's a martial arts master.
Right. But it's chaotic. It requires the character to do something jarring, like giving themselves paper cuts or eating old gum to shock their consciousness into another dimension. And the result is a violent flooding of the brain with foreign sensory inputs. They are left gasping, completely disoriented by the sheer scale of who they could have been.
But the adoptee isn't choosing to chew old gum or put their shoes on the wrong feet to trigger a jump. They aren't trying to access these timelines.
No, and that is the defining trauma of the experience. The verse jumping is entirely involuntary.
Involuntary, that's terrifying.
It is. The alternate timelines intrude upon the adoptee's present reality. It is an uninvited sensory static that disrupts their daily functioning. The essay breaks this lived dislocation down into three specific pillars, starting with the most intimate and inescapable one, the mirror deficit.
The mirror deficit, the bathroom mirror, the place where you literally have to face yourself.
Right.
Think about it for a non-adopted person. A mirror is a tool of genetic continuity. You look at your reflection while brushing your teeth, and your brain subtly registers, oh, there's my father's jawline, or I have my grandmother's eye shape.
It's an affirmation.
Yes. You're physically anchored in a continuous, unbroken chain of humanity.
Yeah.
The mirror proves you belong to your family.
Now consider the neurological dissonance when that continuity is absent.
I can't even imagine.
The mirror deficit occurs when an adoptee looks into that same glass and sees physical features, bone structure, skin tone, eye shape, that possess absolutely zero connection to the people who raised them or the family narrative they've been assigned.
So the mirror is a trigger.
Exactly. Looking in the mirror forces an involuntary verse jump. The brain asks, whose eyes am I actually looking out of? Whose smile is moving on my face?
Oh, wow.
The adoptee is wearing the physical, irrefutable evidence of a severed universe right on their own body. You cannot outrun your own reflection. Every single glance in the mirror is a confrontation with the ghost timeline.
That is deeply unsettling. You are a walking artifact of a lost civilization of one. Your own face is the trigger.
It's a constant friction.
And if the mirror is the intimate micro-level trigger, the essay scales this up to the macro level with the second pillar, which is cultural vertigo.
Mm-hmm.
This happens when the first jumping expands from the individual face to an entire society, specifically for like international or transracial adoptees.
Yeah, cultural vertigo is a profound spatial and geographic dislocation. Imagine an adoptee returning to their country or culture of origin.
Okay.
Say they are walking through a bustling market in Seoul, or down a street in Bogota, or navigating the intricate social dynamics in Addis Ababa. For a tourist, that environment is an exploration, right? An observation of the other.
Yeah, you're just visiting.
But for the adoptee, it triggers a massive systemic verse jump. They are suddenly enveloped by the heavy, ghostly presence of the version of themselves who was never exported.
I'm trying to imagine the sensory overload of that.
Yeah.
You are standing in your birthplace, the environment your DNA is essentially coded for, but you are an alien.
A total outsider to your own origins.
You feel the ghost of the version of you who speaks the language flawlessly, who doesn't have to think about the micro-expressions, who understands the cultural shorthand organically.
Yeah.
The version of you who seamlessly, effortlessly belongs in that specific sunlight.
Yes.
You are physically standing in the exact coordinates of your biological life, but you are locked out of it.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the phantom limb. You feel the architecture of your unlived life pressing against your skin, but you cannot inhabit it. The proprioception, your brain's understanding of where your body is in space, is completely scrambled.
Oh, proprioception, that's the perfect word for it.
It's completely thrown off. You are simultaneously the native and the foreigner. It induces a literal psychological vertigo.
Which brings us to the third pillar, and I'll be honest, I struggle with this one because it completely shatters the foundational mythology we build around adoption.
Oh, it really does.
The essay calls it the burden of the better option.
This is a tough one for society to hear.
It is, because the entire cultural narrative the justification society uses to make the trauma of family separation palatable is that adoption is an inherent rescue.
The savior narrative.
Exactly. Yeah. We tell the child, and we tell ourselves, that they were moved to a quote-unquote better life. So what happens to the adoptee psyche when the adoptive environment turns out to be unsafe?
It forces a catastrophic psychological collapse. When the adoptive environment becomes abusive, neglectful, or deeply emotionally invalidating, the adoptee's mind has no safe harbor in the present. Therefore, the mind violently verse jumps to the severed, kept life.
To the ghost timeline.
Exactly. The alternate universe begins to scream louder than the present reality. The adoptee is trapped agonizing over the ghost version of themselves. They're thinking, would I have been safer if I wasn't taken? Would my original mother have protected me? Would the poverty of my origin have been less damaging than the emotional starvation of this better life?
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I need to play devil's advocate for a second just to clarify this for the listener.
Go for it.
Because people might hear this and think, well, everyone daydreams about a different life.
Right.
If my current life is miserable, if I hate my job or my marriage is failing, I might daydream about a life where I moved to Paris and became a painter.
Sure.
How is the adoptee's first jumping to the kept life fundamentally different from universal human daydreaming? How is it mechanically different from me just daydreaming to cope with a bad Tuesday?
That's a vital distinction. The difference lies in the sensory and structural reality of the unlived life.
Okay, break that down.
Daydreaming is an exercise of imagination, right? It is the brain actively constructing a fantasy vacation to temporarily relieve stress. You are never actually a painter in Paris.
Right. I have zero artistic ability.
Exactly. That timeline never existed in potential. Verse jumping, however, is not imagination. It is psychological friction.
Psychological friction?
Yes, it is generated by an actual severed trajectory. The kept life was a biological and spatial reality that was forcibly bargained away or legislated out of existence by external forces.
It was a real timeline that got stolen.
Yes. The adoptee is dealing with the sensory static of a stolen reality, not a fabricated fantasy. They become a dual citizen of two very real universes, the biological and the administrative.
A dual citizen, but the border crossing is closed.
Completely closed.
You are perpetually stuck in the customs line between these two universes, getting interrogated by both sides and belonging to neither. And if you are carrying that level of friction, if every mirror, every cultural touchstone, every moment of unsafety forces your brain to violently jump between realities, Your psychological battery is going to drain.
It has to.
The system has to overload eventually.
And this compounding exhaustion is what leads us to the film's antagonist, Jobu Tupaki. She serves in this essay as the absolute endpoint of systemic identity erasure.
Let's talk about Jobu Tupaki.
In the film, the character of Joy is pushed by an alternate version of her mother to verse jump relentlessly. She is forced to hold the consciousness of so many universes, to process so many alternate realities simultaneously, that her mind shatters.
Right, she fractures.
She transforms into Jobu Tupaki, an omnipotent being who experiences every possible outcome all at once. And the weight of seeing everything leads her to a terrifying absolute nihilism. She creates the everywhere bagel.
The everywhere bagel.
Yeah, it's a literal black hole of pure collapse, because when everything matters simultaneously, nothing matters at all.
If we map that onto the lived adoptee experience, we are talking about literally jumping through multiversal portals.
No, of course not.
We are talking about the waking, everyday equivalent of that forced splitting. So what does Jobu Tupaki look like in the real world, like structurally?
Structurally, Jobu represents the ultimate endpoint of systemic identity erasure. The exhaustion comes from society forcing the adoptee to split themselves constantly.
Right.
Think about the sheer performative labor required. The adoptee is expected to perform as the perfect, grateful child to validate the adoptive parent's immense emotional and financial investment.
Right. You should be so lucky we chose you.
Exactly. Simultaneously, they must meticulously hide their profound grief over their lost origins, because that grief is deeply threatening to the adoptive family narrative.
Imagine society asking you to be a psychological chameleon just to survive.
That's exactly what it is. Survival.
So they're constantly monitoring the emotional temperature of the room. They are reading the micro-expressions of their adoptive parents to ensure they aren't projecting too much, like orphan trauma.
Precisely. And if they are a transracial adoptee, add another layer of splitting on top of that. They are often forced by society to perform a culture they weren't organically raised in, just to satisfy the external gaze.
Where are you really from?
Yes. Meanwhile, internally, they might be agonizingly searching for their biological roots, while simultaneously suppressing the ache of that search so they can function at their job or in their relationships. They are verse jumping between the grateful rescued child, the disconnected cultural artifact, and the grieving ghost.
That sounds suspiciously like the mechanics of severe psychological dissociation.
It is entirely parallel to dissociation.
If society demands that you be a completely different person depending on which record or family you stand in, depending on who is in the room, if your survival, your access to love and housing, depends on this performative chameleon act, how does your core self survive that profound existential exhaustion?
The bleak truth of the post-tragic lens is that sometimes the core self doesn't survive intact. It risks fragmentation.
Because it's just too much weight.
Yes. The essay uses this incredibly chilling phrase to describe Jobu Tupaki's everywhere bagel. It calls the black hole grief disguised as apathy.
Grief disguised as apathy.
Wow. The feeling of nothing matters, that nihilism is actually just the exhaustion of being asked to be everything to everyone while never actually being seen for who you truly are.
So the apathy isn't actual indifference.
No. The apathy, the nihilism, the nothing matters attitude that we see in Jobu Tupaki and that we honestly see in a lot of adoptees who are unfairly labeled as troubled or rebellious is an advanced defense mechanism.
It's a shield.
It's a shield constructed over an ocean of unprocessable structural grief. It is the profound, bone-deep exhaustion of existing in a constant state of displacement. The apathy is the brain saying, I simply cannot expend the energy required to hold these conflicting universes together anymore. Let the bagel consume it.
So you are standing on the edge of the everywhere bagel. The sheer gravity of the nihilism is pulling at you.
Right.
You're exhausted by the phantom limb, by the mirror deficit, by the relentless performative splitting. If you are in that space, and honestly, this applies to anyone who has experienced a profound fracturing of their identity, how do you step back from the edge?
That's the turning point of the whole piece.
How do you pull yourself back from the event horizon of the bagel? This is where the essay pivots to the climax of the film, and it is a massive departure from the traditional hero's journey.
It is entirely subversive. In a traditional narrative, Evelyn, our protagonist, would use her multiverse powers to just, fix everything. Or she would escape to the timeline where she is a glamorous, wealthy movie star.
Right, she has access to a pristine universe where her heart was never broken. She could just go there.
But the climax of this massive cosmic epic does not take place in a palace or a pristine alternate reality. It takes place in a messy, fluorescent-lit, incredibly mundane laundromat.
The laundromat turn. Evelyn looks at the terrifying, infinite chaos of the multiverse. She looks at the flawless, shiny lives she could have inhabited, and then she looks at her immediate flawed reality. She sees her goofy, deeply imperfect husband. She sees her fractured, hurting daughter standing on the edge of the bagel, and instead of escaping, she makes a radical choice.
A radical choice to just be there.
She anchors herself in the mess. She says, of all the places I could be, I just want to be here with you.
The essay translates this cinematic moment into a vital framework for what it calls the awakening adoptee. It outlines the agonizing integration work required to survive the multiverse, and it breaks this laundromat turn into 3 distinct phases.
Okay, let's break this down for the listener doing the hardest integration work available. What's the first phase?
The first phase is collapsing the bagel.
If the bagel is grief disguised as apathy, how do you collapse a black hole?
You collapse the bagel by fundamentally changing your relationship to the phantom limb. It requires the adoptee to squarely face the ghost version of their kept life and acknowledge it as a reality worthy of profound, unrestrained mourning.
Which society tells them not to do.
Right. Society usually demands that adoptees be over it. Collapsing the bagel means saying, I lost a universe and it is a tragedy. But, and this is where the integration happens, it is the simultaneous realization that while the unlived life must be deeply mourned, it cannot actually be lived.
Oh, that's powerful.
The adoptee must hold the paradox that grief and acceptance are not enemies, they are roommates. You stop allowing the gravity of the unlived life to crush the oxygen out of the present one.
You mourn the ghost, but you stop trying to resuscitate it.
Exactly.
That leads directly into the second phase, which is surrendering the performance. This is where you address the Jobu Tupaki exhaustion, right? The psychological chameleon act.
Yeah. Surrendering the performance is the terrifying cessation of the involuntary verse jumping. It is the conscious decision to stop trying to find the pristine version of the self that makes everyone else comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
The adoptee decides, I am no longer going to be the perfectly grateful, uncomplicated rescue project. I am no longer going to exhaust myself trying to be a flawless cultural bridge between my birth country and my adoptive parents. It is the dropping of the survival masks.
Which is incredibly dangerous. Those masks kept you safe.
They did.
They kept you housed and loved.
Ah.
Dropping them means risking rejection from the very people who built your current reality.
Yeah.
But if you survive dropping the masks, you arrive at the third phase.
Yeah.
Choosing the messy reality.
This is the essence of the laundromat. It is the adoptee looking at their actual, specific, deeply scarred history. It is pulling out the amended birth certificate, looking at the severed biological roots, acknowledging the immense complexities and perhaps the toxic dynamics of their adoptive family, and making a conscious, defiant decision. Yes, deciding that this specific, fragmented, heavily amended version of yourself is the one you are going to inhabit. I am not going to wait for a healed, perfect version of myself to begin living. I choose this mess.
I love that. You don't heal by erasing the parallel timelines. You don't fix the rupture by somehow merging your biological and adoptive lives into a perfect, seamless narrative. You heal by becoming the anchor point in the center of the chaos.
Precisely.
And the essay explicitly introduces and names a specific underlying framework for this state of being. It calls it the fifth dimensional split. I want to dive deep into this because it challenges the entire Western model of psychological healing.
The fifth dimensional split is arguably the most radical concept in the piece.
Yeah, it really is.
Traditional linear therapy models suggest that healing is a straight line, right? You experience a trauma, you process the trauma, the alternate timelines or dissociative states resolve, and you emerge as a singular, fixed, integrated self.
Like a nice, neat little bow.
Exactly. But the fifth dimensional framework argues that for the adoptee, this linear resolution is a physiological and structural impossibility. Attempting to force it is actually harmful.
Because you can't process an administrative erasure out of existence. The missing mother doesn't magically reappear, and the amended certificate doesn't turn back into the original.
Oh, it doesn't.
So what does it actually mean to live in a fifth dimensional split?
It means mapping how simultaneous, entirely unintegrated identity states can exist within a single person at the exact same time.
Right.
You are holding multiple dimensions. You are simultaneously the infant who was permanently separated from their biological mother, and the adult who genuinely loves their adoptive mother, and the citizen who is violently angry at the state system that commodified their existence.
Wow.
None of these truths cancel each other out. The goal of the fifth dimensional split is not to resolve the contradiction by magically erasing the ghosts. The goal is to develop the structural integrity to stand in the center of those multiple dimensions and hold them without being torn apart.
But I keep coming back to the sheer exhaustion of that. In the essay, there's a quote from the film from the husband Wayman, and it's this desperate, beautiful plea. He says, "Please be kind, especially when we don't know what's going on."
It's such a grounding line.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think about applying that kindness to the internal self, because claiming the immediate self sounds exhausting in its own way. So what does this all mean for the adoptees' ghosts? Do they just disappear once you choose the laundromat?
No. And that is the ultimate unflinching post-tragic truth. The ghosts do not disappear.
They don't.
The low-frequency hum of what if does not magically go silent just because you've achieved a level of integration. Presence is not a passive one-time declaration of acceptance. It is a highly active daily choice.
You have to keep making it.
Yes. The ghost selves will always remain, flickering at the edges of the adoptee's consciousness when they look in the mirror or walk through an airport. But they are held differently, not as chains dragging the adoptee into an unchangeable past, nor as prisons keeping them locked out of the present. They become the acknowledged architecture of a complex self.
They become the load-bearing walls of your identity.
Exactly.
You become a person who can look at the chaos and say, yes, I have multiple histories. Yes, I carry multiple contradictory griefs. I am a walking administrative fiction. But right here, right now, in the fluorescent light of this specific life, I choose to stay.
It is the profound shift from being a passive victim of a legislated multiverse to being the active, deliberate author of your presence within it. It is the highest form of self-possession.
This has been incredible. We have mapped an immense, dark, and ultimately deeply illuminating territory today.
It really is an incredible framework.
We started by looking at the rupture, not as a personal choice, but as a violent, administratively imposed event that literally shatters a human timeline and creates the phantom limb of an unlived life. We explored how carrying that phantom limb forces the adoptee into involuntary verse jumping.
The lived dislocation.
The haunting of the mirror deficit, the disorientation of cultural vertigo, and the agonizing pull toward the kept life when the present becomes unbearable.
And we examined the terrifying endpoint of that systemic friction in Jobu Tupaki. We saw how the sheer compounding existential exhaustion of forced splitting, of being a psychological chameleon, performing gratitude and hiding grief, can collapse the core self into the everywhere bagel of nihilism.
And finally, we anchored ourselves in the radical, unglamorous reality of the laundromat turn. We looked at the fifth dimensional split as a framework for holding unintegrated states of being, recognizing that true integration isn't about erasing your alternate selves, but consciously choosing the messy, imperfect present.
It's about presence.
If the mechanics of this identity fracture and repair resonated with you, if you want to truly grasp the depth of this post-tragic perspective, you must read the source text. The essay is The Adoptee Multiverse by Thoughtless Delineation, available on their Substack. It is an absolute masterclass in cultural criticism and psychological insight.
It demands a rigorous reevaluation of how we understand structural trauma, and it leaves us with a critical framework for moving forward. If true healing and integration for an adoptee navigating this extreme structural rupture is an active, repeated, daily choice of presence, rather than the magical resolution of a wound.
You literally have to wake up and choose the laundromat every single morning.
Precisely. It raises an important question for all of you listening, regardless of your proximity to the adoption constellation. What happens when we view all our deeply held identities, our careers, our relationships, our core beliefs, not as fixed, permanent destinations, but as daily choices we must consciously recommit to, despite the ghosts of who we could have been?
Next time you're standing in your kitchen, feeling the sudden crushing weight of the what if, maybe that is the exact moment you decide to choose the room you're standing in.